Within a period of 60 years, two tiny places in Western Europe turned into famous sanctuaries and destinations of countless pilgrims. In 1858, the Virgin Mary appeared to young Bernadette Soubirous in Lourdes, France. In 1917, the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to 10-year-old shepherdess Lucia dos Santos and her little cousins Jacinta and Francis in Fatima, Portugal. Very young, beautiful, and smiling, dressed in a white gown with a blue sash, Our Lady of Lourdes floated above a bush of wild roses, holding a rosary in her right hand. The visions occurred 3 years after Pope Pius IX had proclaimed the dogma that Mary had been conceived without sin. From February to July 1858, Mary appeared to Bernadette 18 times. Her message was to pray for sinners and the depraved world. When Bernadette asked who she was, she said, "I am the Immaculate Conception." Despite the initial confusion and the hostile reaction of the police, as well as church authorities, the miracle of Lourdes was soon recognized, partly also due to numerous inexplicable and miraculous cures. The church allowed the worship of Our Lady of Lourdes. Bernadette died young. She was declared blessed, and in 1933, she was canonized a saint. At the time of Bernadette's canonization, the church authorities in Portugal had already officially permitted the cult of Our Lady of Fatima. The apparitions and enigmatic messages of Fatima were a dramatic outreach and demonstration of the supernatural in the penultimate year of the First World War. Before the Virgin Mary appeared to Lucia, Jacinta, and Francisco, they had visions of her messenger, an angel. The children described him as a transparent young man, brilliant as crystal, who told them he was the guardian angel of their country. The 3 shepherd children saw the Blessed Virgin Mary on the 13th day of May on a slope above the pasture of Lucia's father. Her first words were, "Do not be afraid. I come from heaven. I want you to come here at the same time on the 13th day of every month." In June, she said that she wanted them to establish in the world devotion to her Immaculate Heart. She showed them her heart encircled in thorns and wounded by the sins of mankind. In July, she showed the shepherd children a vision of hell, a place of eternal torment, and then she indicated that after the war, if people did not refrain from offending God, there would be another and even more horrible war. The apparitions soon became a matter of public knowledge, and even the mayor of the district was alerted and tried to frighten the children and force them to recant their story of seeing the Virgin Mary. He even threw them in prison and threatened to burn them, but the children remained unshakable. The Fatima parish priest cynically told Lucia, "You tell the lady that I'm the parish priest. If she needs something, she can come and visit me." Meanwhile, the word had spread throughout Portugal and Spain. Every 13th of the month, a large crowd of people appeared, especially in October, as the lady had told the children that she would reveal her name on that day and perform a miracle. She told Lucia and Jacinta that she was the Lady of the Rosary and showed them Saint Joseph with the child Jesus in the brilliant light. And then the miracle that she had promised occurred. If anybody had doubted the veracity of the visions and conversations between the children and the Virgin Mary, all suspicions evaporated as tens of thousands of people, young and old, believers and non-believers, learned professors and simple-minded farmers, saw and felt what happened in October 1917. The sun began to spin round on itself in a mad whirl. sending out rays of color in all directions. Then it stopped, and people suddenly had the impression that the sun had loosened itself from the firmament and was swiftly rushing toward them. A cry of anguish and horror shook the valley. The phenomenon lasted about 10 minutes, and there are numerous eyewitness reports of this miracle. This was the last time that the Virgin Mary appeared in Fatima. Francisco, who had seen the Virgin Mary but never heard what she said, died of Spanish fever in 1919, while his sister, little brave Jacinta, died in early 1920. Lucia remained the only keeper of the secrets which the Madonna had revealed to the children. Lucia entered a convent, spent 20 years in Spain, and at the time of Pius XII, expressed her desire to become a Carmelite nun. She returned to Portugal and took the name Mary of the Immaculate Heart. She provided a very detailed and realistic description of her visions and decided to publish everything that the Madonna had told and shown her, except the third part of the secret. Pope Pius XII conceded the church in Fatima the title of Basilica. Pope Paul VI made a pilgrimage to Fatima on the 50th anniversary of the apparitions. Lucia was still alive at the time. She would experience old age and die at the beginning of the 21st century. Lucia disclosed the first parts of the secret prior to World War II, including the vision of hell, the devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and the demand for the conversion of Russia, which would otherwise spread her errors throughout the world. In a radio address, Pius XII consecrated the entire human race to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Lucia wrote down the third part of the secret. In 1957, the envelope containing the document was handed to Pope John XXIII. He read it and decided to store the document in the secret archives of the Vatican. In her manuscript, Lucia foretold the murder of the Pope, describing a vision in which a group of soldiers fired bullets and arrows at the Holy Father. The prophecy came true in 1981 when Turkish mercenary Ali Agca attempted to assassinate Pope John Paul II on the 13th of May, the feast of Our Lady of Fatima. The Pope suffered serious wounds, but survived the assassination attempt. He was convinced that the Lady of Fatima had deflected the bullets and prevented his death. After recovering from his injuries, John Paul II visited Fatima and gave one of the bullets that had hit him to be set in the crown of Our Lady of Fatima. The Church did not reveal the entire third part of the secret before the year 2000, with the commentary that the foretold assassination had already taken place, but had been averted due to heavenly intervention. The very same year that Pope John Paul II was severely wounded in St. Peter's Square in Rome, the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to a group of children in the tiny Herzegovinian village of Medjugorje. Difficult times were awaiting these innocent children. Incredulity, suspicion, allegations of hallucinations were similar to what the children in Fatima had endured, but in this case, there was another factor that could not be disregarded: politics. The news of the apparitions in Medjugorje shocked and terrified the Yugoslav communists in power, who did everything in their power to uphold the communist regime after the death of Yugoslavia's dictator, Tito. They were convinced that the alleged Marian apparitions in a Franciscan parish could be nothing other but an anti-regime and anti-communist deception.
U jednom trenutku, kad Gospa dolazi pred oltar, mi prestajemo moliti. U istom trenutku molitva zamire, otvara se jednostavno srce, oči, duše, srca. Gospod zahvaljuje na molitvi i kaže, draga djeco, svaki dan molite skupa, ružari, molite srcem.
The same communists who had killed 66 Herzegovinian Franciscan friars after World War II had ended, now began to persecute the Franciscans in Medjugorje. The first victim was parish priest Jozo Zovko, who was arrested and accused of enemy propaganda.
Ta policija 17. kolovoza, dakle u 6 sati se nalazi pred župnim uredom, a cijelu noć su se raspoređivali oko tromeđe, blokirali su ceste, šume, bili su skriveni u zasjedi. Zašto? Oni su mene stavili u golf. Nisu mi dali obućaviti, ja sam protestirao, to je moja odjeća i ja se ne mogu udaljiti iz kuće, to sam ja. Ne, nisu mi dali. Pojavio se čovjek, dakle, koji je iskaznicu svoju policijsku pokazao, nerodom Čapljinac, i kazao da je Hrvat, stavljaju me u golf. Kad dolazimo na tromeđu, ja vidim kako mi golje, vidi se. Oni su tu zaustavili golf i sad kad prijeđite na drugu stranu, tamo je stajala Marica, ja sam polako prešao na drugu stranu i čekao kod auta, nema vozač, kao da spava. Ja pričekam čovjeka, on će me otvoriti gepek i ubaci me unutra u tu Maricu, jer su oni mislili da ću ja reagirati spontano pa poče bježati. Niz te okuke, sjećam se, 4 gume su bile, 5 unutra, selgama, to leta, to udara, ti se ne možeš braniti jer si svezan. I gdje su me doveli, to ne znam, znam da je bila soba 84.
The indictment had no direct connection to the apparitions. In fact, Zovko was accused because of his sermons delivered during the summer of that year. The investigating judge claimed that Zovko, speaking of 40 years of slavery, darkness, chains, and suffering, had been referring to the 40th anniversary of the uprising of our nations against the occupying power and domestic traitors. Father Zovko's defense attorney was Dr. Milan Vukovic, who demanded an expert theological report in order to prove that Father Zovko was merely using a reference from the Bible, where the number 40 had a symbolic meaning. The priest was sentenced to several years in prison, but was released earlier, in February 1983. He was immediately transferred to another parish. The Yugoslav Secret Service believed that by eliminating Father Zovko and intimidating the other Franciscans, they would finally put a stop to Medjugorje. But what happened was the exact opposite. More and more pilgrims visited the apparition hill, and the attempt to forbid people visiting the apparition site proved futile.
Počeli su progoniti roditelje, počeli su progoniti hodočasnike i napokon su zaključili na toj komisiji najbolje je da zatvorimo brdo. I oni su zatvorili brdo ukazanje, zatvorili brdo Križevac. Ja sam došao iz zatvora 17.3. 18. sam htio se popeti nakon što sam pohodio biskupa i provincijala na podbrdo. Nisam mogao od policije. To je bio vojnik do vojnika, policajac do policajca. Oni su danonoćno stražarili.
The communist press, especially papers printed in Belgrade, published numerous scornful articles about the apparitions, calling the Lady of Peace an Ustaše Madonna, portraying the children visionaries as deranged. It was all in vain. Medical examinations showed that the children were normal and intelligent, and nothing could sway or abet them to deny what they had seen and experienced from the first day of the visions on the 24th of June, 1981.
Ima bijeli veliki valjni krum. Krum.
Krum. Kakva je krum zlatna?
Sjajna.
Aha, a gdje je vidiš?
Gdje kod kuće?
Bez obzira gdje si u ta doba, u koliko sati?
U 6.
Uvijek u 6. Kad si kod kuće? A gdje dođe kad si kod kuće?
Kuće.
Gdje je kuće?
Se kuće Bude.
Ajde ti nešto kaže.
Je.
Šta?
Pitam za bolesne.
24. lipanj 81. godine ostaće uvijek kao najvažniji dan u mom životu. Ivanka i ja smo odlučili da izađemo van iz sela, da budemo malo same, da razgovaramo o stvarima koje su za nas izgledale jako važne. Jer ja sam imala 16, a ona 15 godina. Šetali smo ispod brda, današnjeg brda Ukazanja, i u jednom momentu ona mi je rekla, ja mislim da je Gospa na brdu, samo tako. I ja sam vidjela ženu u sivoj, dugoj haljini sa bijelim velom kako drži dijete u naručju.
Normalno nije nam bilo jasno ko je, što je. U tom momentu nismo mi ni prekrstili se, ni ništa. Nismo znali šta bi trebali da radimo.
Dođem na pola puta i vidim Milku, sestru od Marije, ona je bila skupa s njima. I trče prema meni i kaže, Vicka, požuri, požuri.
U tom momentu da je naišlo ne znam koliko naroda, mi bi sve zovnili da dođe tu da vidi, jer nismo bili sigurni sami u se.
Kaže ona meni, Vicka, Gospa. Kakva Gospa? Kad sam se ja okrenula, bacila papuče s noga i pobjegla, ma ne bi me niko stiga.
Nisam nikad mogao sanjati da se može Gospa ukazati.
I on kad je vidio, sjeća se kao da je danas bilo, nosio je jabuke u naručju. I kad je vidio, sve je bacio, kažem kao svaki hrabri muškarac, sve je bacio i pobjegao kući.
I onda ona je zvala nas rukom da mi dođemo, ali prvu večer mi smo svi pobjegli.
Ja sam njima rekla da ja moram ići ispod brda, da mene nešto vuče i ja jednostavno moram.
Jedan dio tebe koji je nešto ti govorio, nešto priprema, znaš, točno osjetiš u srcu da se nešto događa, ali ne svojom voljom, ali nešto lijepo.
I mi smo otišli skupa sa Vickom i prvo smo sa puta vidjeli jedan ženski lik koji nas poziva sa rukom da dođemo na brdo Ukazane.
I prije nego što ćemo doći do toga mjesta, možda na 20-30 metara, Gospa nas već čeka. I u tom trenutku kad smo vidjeli, moje se noge bile posjekle, ja više nisam mogla ni naprijed ni nazad. Mislim se opet pobjeći, ali nešto jače je bilo od mene, iznutra. Ali u jednom trenutku, kao da smo lebdili preko tog kamenja, žbunja koje je bilo ispred nas, prišli smo bliže njoj.
Vidjeli smo Gospu na istom mjestu, samo ovaj put nije imala dijete u naručju. I taj drugi dan, 25.6., prvi put smo došli ka Gospi i tako su počela naša svakodnevna ukazanja.
Sigurno smo mi bili nosili nekom velikom silom gore na brdo Ukazane, jer ja se isto ne sjećam kako smo došli do gore.
The six of them were headed for the slope Podbrda on the hill Zenica when they saw a beautiful young woman with a child in her arms. Scared, they ran away, but came back the next day and saw the Madonna without child in a ray of light. They kneeled down and prayed, and they talked to her. On that day the Virgin Mary appeared to Ivanka and Viska Ivanković, Mirjana and Ivan Dragicević, Maria Pavlović, and Yakov Cholo. She told them she was the Blessed Virgin Mary. She spoke of peace and nothing but peace. Peace between man and God and peace between men.
Jer Gospa kaže, vi prije svake molitve odstranite sve one misli koje vam smetaju, onda počnite moliti.
Obraćanje je jedan proces i obraćanje naše traje cijelog života. I ne možemo reći da ćemo se mi obratiti za jedan dan ili za mjesec dana. To je jedan dugoročan proces koji traje do naše smrti.
The apparitions continued. When the Yugoslav police forbade the people from visiting the apparition hill, the Madonna appeared to the visionaries in the St. Jacob Parish Church, conveying messages of peace, prayer, fast, and faith. She told them she was the Queen of Peace. The communists, however, sensing that they were losing control, became quite nervous, including local apparatchiks such as UDBA agent Lasic, who, like a true Bolshevik hardliner, demanded that the Franciscans all be arrested because they were fascist. But the restlessness also spread among the highest-ranking guardians of communism in both Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union. as demonstrated by recent historic research. In fact, the events in Medjugorje immediately awoke the interest of the Yugoslav, but also Soviet Secret Service, the KGB. Colonel General Alexander Maximov, a high-ranking KGB official, soon arrived in Yugoslavia in the company of his comrade Malakov and met with the aforementioned agent Lasic and agents Miloš and Predojević.
Я узнал про Междугорье в июле 1981 года, когда мы впервые услышали от нашего руководителя о том, что в Югославии происходят события, представляющие угрозу нашему строю, коммунистическому строю. Мы получали такую информацию от различных источников, потому что через несколько дней руководством было принято решение направить меня и товарища Малахова в Белград для проведения консультаций с коллегами из югославской тайной полиции. Все решалось очень быстро, и это дало основание полагать, что происходящее действительно носит крайне серьезный характер. Ну, конечно же, главной темой нашей встречи было Междугорье и проблемы, возникшие из-за так называемого явления Девы Марии, а также иные возможные негативные последствия, которые она может за собой повлечь. Но та информация, которая дошла до нас в Москве, указывала на то, что некоторые западные спецслужбы и Ватикан, что существенно, предпринимают активные действия с целью свержения коммунистического строя в Югославии. В тот период положение коммунизма, в принципе, было достаточно шаткое, я имею в виду, в Югославии. Любые новости мы воспринимали крайне серьезно, нервно воспринимали, тем более такие, как события Междугорья. Мы понимали, что Ватикан играет важную роль в жизни данных регионов Югославии, поэтому было принято решение действовать незамедлительно.
He revealed to the astonished Yugoslav agents that the KGB had been present in Medjugorje from day one.
Zašto Moskva kaže to ne smije preživjeti? Zašto to govori, recimo, Varšava? Zašto Jerzevski drugi govori to ne smije ostati na nogama, to se mora u temelju uništiti? Zašto Beograd kaže rušite, palite to selo? Zašto to govori? Oni su osjećali snagu i milost da je to koja njima zada jedan strah, jednu njihovu stavljaju jednu nesigurnost. Osjećali su, ako ovo bude što govore djeca i plus Kosovo, onda nas više nema. Tite više nema i ko će to sve sačuvati? I zato su bili zainteresirani da ostane Jugoslavija.
Maksimov wanted to know what the Mostar Duvno Bishop Žanić thought about Medjugorje, and the Yugoslav agents told him that the bishop was inclined to believe in the apparitions.
Pisalo je tamo da su odgovorne crkvene vlasti u Mostaru rekle da je ovo sve praznovjerje. Mene nitko ništa nije pitao i ništa nisam rekao i ta je riječ neistinita. Također sam duboko uvjeren da nitko nije djecu koja kažu da su vidjeli Gospu, da nitko tu djecu nije podgovorio. Da se radi o jednom djetetu, moglo bi se reći, ma ta ima neku tvrdu glavu, pa ne može policija ništa iz njega izvući. 6 nevine, jednostavne djece, kroz pola sata bi, kad bi neko nagovorio, djeca kazala. Sve, nitko od svećenika, ja jamčim i garantiram, nije tu imao nikakve namjere, niti udjela da bi djecu na nešto nagovarao. I zato su i te riječi uvredljive i treba ih odbaciti. Također sam uvjeren, djeca ne lažu. To sam duboko uvjeren. Djeca ne lažu. Djeca govore točno ono što je u njihovom srcu.
But the Yugoslav Secret Service were certain that the problem could be solved easily, as Lasic allegedly possessed a compromising document which would induce Žanić to change his mind about the Medjugorje miracle.
Takve njihove fantazije, često puta i halucinacije, pomalo ubijaju ugled i vrijednost Fatime, Lurda, Isusa Krista, i onda nam mogu reći, vidiš kako ste vi krivo vjerovali, ako bi se dokazalo da je bilo krivo, što uvijek može se dogoditi da oni koji danas govore da vide, mogu do 10 godina reći nisam ništa vidio.
Товарищ Милош сообщил, что может решить все проблемы, потому что, как было сказано раньше, Лашич был компромат, некий компромат на епископа Занича. Ну, я похвалил его за проделанную работу. Я посчитал это важным в свете наших контактов с Ватиканом.
Due to the nature of his profession, Soviet intelligence agent Maximov had excellent connections in the Vatican. In Rome, he met with Secretary of State Cardinal Casaroli and Vatican diplomat Pietro Sambi. Maximov expressed his concerns about the events in Medjugorje, not regarding the faith, but regarding the fate of communism and the potential impact of Medjugorje. In early September, Maximov met again with Pietro Sambi at the Columbus Hotel in Rome, demanding that the Vatican exert pressure on the Minister General of the Franciscan Order, as otherwise the Yugoslav Secret Service would be compelled to use force.
Мы передали им слова товарища Лашича и других югославских коллег про фашизм и францисканцев. И то, что францисканцы тесно связаны с хорватскими экстремистскими группировками за рубежом. И то, что они просто используют детей в своих целях, а именно хотят уничтожить социализм в Югославии. Если опираться на данные наших информаторов, то речь шла вовсе не о религии, еще раз скажу, речь шла о политике. Это была опасной игрой, и мы ни в каком случае не могли эту игру допустить. Но в частности, я говорил им, что епископу крайне опасно открыто выражать поддержку происходящему. Потому что, если верить нашим югославским коллегам, происходило там не что иное, как контрреволюция. 4 октября 1981 года. Там я встретился с кардиналом Касароли. Самби тоже был на этой встрече. Я показал им один документ по Заничу, который попал ко мне на стол. Он редкость компрометирующий документ. Если коротко, там речь шла про интимные отношения между ним, епископом, и молодым коллегой. Ну, там были и прочие детали, которые никак не сочетаются со статусом священнослужителя. Признаюсь, я сам был удивлен количеством подробностей в этом документе, который, ко всему прочему, еще и был завизирован подписью самого епископа Занича, то есть это был подлинный документ, не фальсификация. Надо сказать, что оба моих собеседника в Риме были поражены. Я объяснил, что у меня очень хорошие связи в югославской полиции, а у тех, в свою очередь, есть хорошее досье. Они напрямую работают со многими представителями православного и католического мира и много чего знают.
Maximov conveyed the greetings of his boss, Yuri Andropov, and as a gesture of goodwill, left a personal gift for the Pope, a list of priests who collaborated with the Secret Service in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Yugoslavia, and Ukraine. At the time of Father Jozo Zovko's trial, the Church began to search for Bishop Žanić's successor. The rector of the Croatian Institute of St. Jerome, Ratko Perić, was invited for an interview. While UDBA agent Lasić was trying to blackmail Bishop Žanić in Mostar, Ratko Perić declared in Rome that he would accept any duty the Church chose to entrust to him.
Я был приглашен на встречу с ним и товарищем Кузнецовым. С того момента, по 89-й год, мы с ним пересекались, наверное, раз 7, да.
Perić disfavored the Herzegovinian Franciscans because of the division of parishes, but his aversion soon became almost irrational.
Мы пришли к соглашению, что будем сотрудничать, что мы будем разговаривать и вырабатывать общий план действий для него с целью прекращения антиюгославских и антигосударственных настроений, которые начали развиваться и бродить в Междугорье. Я сразу ему сказал, что религиозный аспект меня совершенно не интересует. Но вот антикоммунистическую деятельность я не потерплю, так я ему и сказал. Он согласился сотрудничать, но конкретных условий мы не проговорили. Он, в свою очередь, просил помощи югославской тайной полиции в подавлении влияния францисканцев в Герцеговине. Сказал, что если мы сможем гарантировать наши активные действия и гарантировать успех в подавлении влияния францисканцев, то он сполна отомстит францисканцам за все, что они творят в Междугорье. Perić нам объяснил, что цель францисканцев – отобрать у епископа приходы, которые им, согласно каким-то церковным уставам, пришлось отдать. Perić все время говорил о том, как важно нам сотрудничать. Ведь францисканцы, как он говорил, очень упрямые и хорошо обеспечены финансово. Он лично считал все происходящее глобальным мошенничеством и стремился доказать это миру. Помню, даже сказал, что все эти так называемые явления Богоматери и правда, он все равно бы придушил эти новости. Он не дал бы им ходу. И он даже знает, как бы он это сделал. По его словам, с францисканцами не шутит, надо быть жесткими и тоже идти на обман. Именно так. И он заверил меня, что нам он доверяет. Он видел, как мы работаем и добиваемся результата. Он предложил, чтобы мы совместными усилиями с ним, с моим итальянским коллегой, который нас, собственно, и познакомил, и с нашими югославскими коллегами сели вместе и обсудили ситуацию. Но просил ни в коем случае не засвечивать его имя. Во всем, что касается темы изгнания францисканцев, его имя не должно было звучать. Он все повторял, что с францисканцами ничего иного не сработает, только крепкая рука.
Documents that were recently discovered in Russia prove that Bishop Zhanic was blackmailed by the Yugoslav Secret Service. Subsequently, the bishop agreed to cooperate and, at the explicit request of the Secret Service, radically changed his opinion about the Medjugorje apparitions. Among other things, to the satisfaction of the Secret Service, he dispatched letters to many bishops, asking them to stop the flow of pilgrims to Medjugorje. The Yugoslav Secret Service was happy, as the bishop carried into action everything they requested. In Rome, Bishop Zhanic met with Ratko Peric, but was reluctant to relinquish the Mostar diocese, as had initially been planned, arguing that things should not be rushed, because he had been assured that the incriminating document against him had been destroyed. Several years had passed, and the attraction of Medjugorje was steadily growing. Nothing could stop the faithful from flocking to Medjugorje from all parts of the world. The Yugoslav Secret Service encountered technical problems with their wiretapping. So Bishop Zhanic had to recount his conflict with Cardinal Kuharic at a meeting of the Bishops' Conference of Yugoslavia. As a matter of fact, the Archbishop of Zagreb resented the fact that Bishop Zhanic spoke contemptuously about Medjugorje, although the Church had still not reached a conclusion regarding the matter.
Al fenomeno del Medjugorje si pongono due domande: se le apparizioni sono autentiche e che fare con la gente che viene a Medjugorje. Prescindendo dalla questione dell'autenticità delle apparizioni, si pone davvero una seria domanda: come trattare i pellegrini, perché non sono tutti i pellegrini, sono tanti i curiosi, sono anche i turisti e i giornalisti. Perciò adesso la Commissione studia il fenomeno dell'autenticità, se è o no. Quindi noi vescovi aspettiamo questi risultati dalla Commissione che lavora, ho detto già, seriamente e obiettivamente e liberamente, responsabile per il suo lavoro.
From the beginning of the apparitions in Medjugorje, many Franciscans had to suffer in different ways, from prison sentences, transfer to remote parishes, or even expulsion from the Franciscan order. Available documents indicate that such actions resulted from the fear of the Yugoslav Secret Service of the influence of Medjugorje on the decaying communist system, coupled with the irrational intolerance of Bishop Zhanic and Bishop Peric shown to the Franciscans and Medjugorje apparitions.
Storicamente è conosciuto a tutti che in tutti i paesi socialisti la Chiesa era perseguitata, limitata nella sua missione, e questa persecuzione si è manifestata nei rapporti del governo verso i vescovi, sacerdoti, religiosi, religiose e specialmente i fedeli, perché i fedeli sono stati molto condizionati nei posti più esponenti. Per esempio un credente nella scuola, un credente nell'esercito, nella polizia, sui posti politici o più importanti posti sul settore culturale, non dovevano esprimere la loro condizione religiosa in pubblico, quindi sono stati molto limitati.
Pope John Paul II followed with great interest what was happening in Medjugorje. He refrained from statements that could be interpreted as opposition to the Medjugorje phenomenon. Moreover, the Pope, who would be canonized shortly after his death, once said that if he had not become Pope, he would have long since become a confessor in Medjugorje. As a politically cognizant Pope who contributed significantly to the fall of communism, Wojtyla was very much aware of the devastating impact of Medjugorje on the totalitarian atheistic system.
А 7 декабря 1986 года, когда я был в Риме, я встретился с Альберто Трикарико. Я не очень хорошо его знал, но его прислал в Ватикан. Он рассказал, что имеет проблемы с Междугорьем, так как папа требует постоянных отчетов о том, что и как там происходит. По его словам, папу очень беспокоило Междугорье. Я высказал мнение, что, будучи поляком по рождению, папа является ярым антикоммунистом, а потому сделает все от себя зависящее, все, что от него зависит, чтобы подорвать коммунистическое влияние или даже уничтожить коммунистический строй. Альберто не согласился. По его мнению, Ватикан так мониторил Междугорье по соображениям веры, распространения веры, и вовсе не по политическому принципу. Я не стал спорить. Просто сказал, что мы со своей стороны советуем нашим югославским коллегам принимать жесткие меры в случае возникновения критики в социалистической Югославии. И неважно, от кого она будет исходить. А в феврале 1987 года, 6 февраля, я передал Ratko Periću папку под названием «Срница», которой с нами поделились югославские коллеги. Он обрадовался. Но снова просил надавить на францисканцев и Междугорье, так как ситуация, про которую он говорил ранее, была все еще очень сильно накалена. Он постоянно подчеркивал, что монахи активно копают под епископа, и что надо усиливать давление и принимать жесткие меры. Так как по-хорошему, как он считал, францисканцы не поймут.
As the 80s were coming to an end, one could intuit the imminent disintegration of Yugoslavia and the collapse of communism. In 1988, at a meeting between Maksimov, Aleksic, Lasic, and KGB chief Chebrikov, there was an air of uncertainty and despondency. Frustrated, Lasic said that Yugoslavia was about to break apart. The Croats were seeking independence, and all this was happening because the Yugoslav authorities had not listened to him and had failed to employ brute force in time. At the end of the meeting, Chebrikov sent his regards to Tovarish Milosevic. Serbia's new ruler, the communist Slobodan Milosevic, was preparing for war and the creation of a greater Serbia, which he intended to achieve through brutal aggression and annexation of a substantial part of Croatia, as well as the entire Bosnia-Herzegovina. It was then that Mary's constant insistence on peace, as well as her appearing in the southeast of Europe, at the intersection of different religions and cultures, became self-explanatory. And yet, in 1991, on the eve of the war, the Bishops' Conference of Yugoslavia convened in Zadar and adopted a declaration stating that on the basis of investigations, it could not be affirmed that one was dealing with supernatural apparitions and revelations. Through their commission, they would continue to monitor and investigate the Medjugorje phenomenon. Those, however, who continued to believe in the apparitions found solace in the words of the great Jewish teacher of law, Gamaliel, who stood before the Jewish High Council at the time of the persecution of Christians, saying, "If this plan or undertaking is of men, it will fail, but if it is of God, you will not be able to stop it." Yugoslavia disintegrated in blood. The war raged in Herzegovina, which the bold Croatian citizens managed to defend, thus preventing the aggressor from reaching the Croatian part of the Adriatic. Medjugorje was spared to some extent. Admittedly, the river of pilgrims dried up somewhat during the years of war, but became an unstoppable torrent with the first signs of peace.
Io ho parlato 2 volte qui con una ragazza di queste 4, Vicka. Ho parlato 1 ora e mezza e gli chiesi tutte le circostanze e le ho posto la domanda: Vicka, sei tu convinta 100% di vedere la Madonna? Essa ha risposto: io sono convinta non 100%, ma 1.000.000%. Bene, la ora è passata e era ora delle apparizioni. E io ho detto: ecco, la Madonna non è arrivata. Essa si è alzata andando verso la porta e stando disse: preghiamo e la Madonna verrà. E si è fatta al ginocchio qui, guardava il crocifisso, cominciava a pregare Padre Nostro, poi è stata zitta. Io ho osservato dalla parte del suo atteggiamento, guardava, poi ho visto che parla ma non si sente niente, poi disse e se n'è andata. A me ha dato l'impressione di una ragazza molto aperta, senza un complesso, e parlava così apertamente, sicura in quello che dice, così.
Many books on Medjugorje in almost all languages were written. Thousands of television stories had been recorded. After his feature film, In the Middle of My Days, Yakov Sedlar directed the movie Gospa with the famous American actor Martin Sheen. The movie was shown in cinemas around the world.
Who is the Son of God, confirms his ministry and proclaims his purpose, that he alone is the fulfillment of the long-promised command of Isaiah to unbound the prisoners and set all the captives free. Like Lazarus, we are called by Jesus to come forth from our slavery to addictions, to come forth from our tombs of fear, to come forth from our prisons of darkness where we have been languishing these 40 years. There is a great darkness in the world, my friends, and it has manifested itself in recent times in these terrorism attacks and assassination attempts. The most recent one, of course, is on the life of our own dear Holy Father.
We thank God that he was spared, but we are left to wonder seriously.
What does all of this mean? What kind of a future are we inviting if we continue on this course? Now, perhaps, friends, we cannot personally influence governmental decisions that affect the world, nor can we affect those at the United Nations, nor can we have any influence on the superpowers to end the arms race and stop building these horrible weapons of mass destruction. Such is the stone-cold reality of the world in which we live, and we are subject to it. And yet, my friends, indirectly, with our strength of spirit and faith, we Christians can have a very powerful effect on this world. Our strength is in our bended knees. Our power is in our uplifted arms. And our future is in our willingness to bear the cross of Christ with patience and courage. The lunacy and darkness of this world can only be overcome with humility, with self-sacrifice, and above all, with love.
Bishop Žanić held on to his position in Mostar until 1993. Just before the war, he spent 2 years as apostolic administrator of the Diocese of Dubrovnik. Documents that were discovered in Moscow show that because of his weakness, he had been blackmailed and had subsequently agreed to cooperate with the Yugoslav Secret Service by disparaging Medjugorje. At long last, in the middle of the war, Žanić was succeeded by Bishop Ratko Perić, who did not collaborate with the Yugoslav secret services directly. He distrusted and feared local connections, but remained on good terms with one of the KGB deputy chairmen, his Roman acquaintance, Lieutenant General Maximov.
Ну, интеллигентный человек и, конечно, очень-очень образованный. Ну, самовлюбленный немного. Казалось, что он никого и ничего не любит так, как себя. Но при этом он достаточно прагматичен. честен и всегда выполнял обещанное. То есть настоящий человек слова. Он не уставал говорить, что францисканцы – это главная угроза, именно они. Но не давали они ему покоя просто. Считал, что это их вина в том, что сместили его предшественника Занича, что компромат, который попал в руки полиции, в мои руки, это на самом деле их рук дело. Все хотел как-то их запугать, бросить за решетку, потому что другие методы с ними вряд ли, как он считал, сработают. Говорил, что их нужно обвинить публично, ведь в реальности их ничто, кроме денег, не интересует, что до веры или Бога им на самом деле нет никакого дела. Он вообще считал, что во всех бедах Югославии виноваты францисканцы, что они никого не слушают, и усмирить их не представляется возможным, если не предпринять к ним экстремальные, самые жесткие меры.
Perić agreed to cooperate with the KGB under the condition that the KGB exert pressure on the Yugoslav Secret Service to impede the Franciscans in their activities in Herzegovina. It was for that reason that the KGB took over the coordination with the Yugoslav colleagues, so that nobody should know that Perić had something to do with the brutal persecution of the Franciscans. Perić continued to cultivate these contacts and meetings even after the disintegration of the Soviet Union. KGB agents from all parts of the world kept him informed about Medjugorje. They fed him information on what the Franciscans were doing and planning, what bishops around the globe were saying on the subject, and he asked them to influence these bishops so that they would speak out against the phenomenon and discourage the faithful from going to Medjugorje. He was very pleased when the KGB presented him with the file Zirnica. This was the code name of the Yugoslav Secret Service's operation against Medjugorje. It remains an inexplicable fact that Ratko Perić, who was on the verge of believing in the supernatural nature of the events in Medjugorje, maintained that the phenomenon must be crushed. Maximov, he said that even if there is some truth in these apparitions, that he would destroy even this tiny part of truth, and that he knew how to do it. Bishop Perić has not changed his mind about the apparitions and the Franciscans, all of which resulted in serious tensions and divisions that present a heavy burden on the religious life in Herzegovina. During the papacy of Benedict XVI, a commission headed by Cardinal Ruini investigated the Medjugorje phenomenon. The findings of the commission were not disclosed, but sources reveal that the commission recommended that the Church should recognize the supernatural nature of the apparitions, not all, but the first that occurred in the early 80s of the 20th century. Pope Benedict resigned, and the conclave elected a new pope, Argentine Cardinal Bergoglio, who took the name Francis. On the centennial of the apparitions of Fatima and the feast of Our Lady of Lourdes in 2017, Pope Francis draws public attention to Medjugorje, and by doing so, symbolically connects the three European Marian shrines that have become famous due to apparitions. More than 35 years have passed since the first apparitions in Medjugorje. A small village in Herzegovina now holds a prominent position on the global religious map. The Vatican understands that the Church must extend its hand to the pilgrims and demonstrate that Medjugorje is important, and that the Vatican wishes to maintain a presence there, although the Church is not yet prepared to recognize the Medjugorje phenomenon and apparitions. Pope Francis appointed Polish Archbishop Henryk Hosser as a special envoy of the Holy See to Medjugorje, and also revoked the long-standing decision of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith that priests should not visit Medjugorje. Special Envoy Henryk Hosser will not enter into doctrinal issues, meaning that he will not launch a new investigation of the apparitions. His mission has a pastoral character. In parallel, he will work on reinforcing the connection with the visionaries. The controversies over the Medjugorje phenomenon continue, although there is room for optimism regarding the recognition of the apparitions. The ordinary devout pilgrim from some distant country probably does not even know about these controversies. He was drawn to Medjugorje by the unusual story of miraculous events. But once there, he discovers that he has become a protagonist of the drama that takes place here every day. The drama is about a man seeking comfort, faith, health, and love. A man who is in the middle between nothing and everything, as Pascal said. And it is the fascination with touching the supernatural that allows him to feel the fullness of spiritual life, raising him from futility to a higher form of consciousness.